Hello, everyone. I'm excited to see you at the Power Platform Community Conference. My name is James Olenek, and I'm the Director of Product Management for Microsoft Dataverse. I'll be hosting a session around the next wave of capabilities for Microsoft Dataverse and Copilot connectors. And my team will be hosting several workshops where you can get your hands dirty with using Microsoft Dataverse and our connector platform to build the enterprise-grade knowledge and business logic layer to span your low-code, Power Platform, and Copilot solutions. And for those of you on the go, don't miss out on the Low Code Approach podcast. It's a great way to stay informed and inspired about all things Power Platform, even while traveling. So tune in and join the conversation as we unlock the full potential of low-code development everywhere. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all at the conference.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I am Sean Feeney, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team, one of three hosts, which means I'm joined by...
I'm Wendy Haddad, and I am a Senior Cloud Solution Architect, Delivery Lead, and a former Microsoft customer. And I'm afraid of the next intro that's coming, but I am joined by...
As you can see, she gets very choked up and emotional when talking about me, which is perfectly fine. Please join us, myself, Ken Aguillard, Wendy, and Sean, as we head out Wesener to get molded by our next guest. Clay, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you all for having me. And great start with the puns, Ken.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Clay joins us. Clay is the Partner Group Product Manager for the Power App Studio. Thank you so much for joining us, which really means we're going to narrow down on the topic of Power Apps Studio. We are in this joyous time of post-build where we made a ton of awesome announcements, and that actually kind of directs me to my first question. Clay, how was your build, and what was the most exciting announcement for you at build?
Build was busy, as we know, trying to get together and have this conversation. Look, it was a really exciting time. I think I've worked on Studio now for many years, and we've had a few things that have been long-running goals for us and targets. One was visual ERD in working with data. We've been talking about it for a long time. It's been a top customer request. Second was about working with code in the studio, having a code view, being able to copy and paste code. And then the third is live co-authoring, how developers can work together in the studio on the same app. We landed all three of those as part of our build announcements. It was a really busy week, but it also meant we could tell a really compelling end-to-end for developers collaborating on the platform, whether that be 2 developers collaborating, 5 developers collaborating together in the Canvas studio, whether that's someone collaborating by sending code snippets to each other, or whether that's someone collaborating with Copilot working over their data. It was really exciting for us. A lot changed within the studio. Those are all out in public now in customers' hands and getting used. So we're already seeing great adoption, and it's been sort of exciting to see that initial response and already customers coming back and asking for the next round and the next push from us.
That's awesome, Clay. And because we have a mixture of listeners on our podcast, some are on the pro dev side and some are admins and some are more of the business developers. You mentioned a feature, I think you said it was visual ERD at the beginning that you announced. We always like to define acronyms. So can you talk a little bit about what that specific feature is and what that does, just to lay some context for everyone?
Please call me out anytime I'm using an acronym.
We'll get a little buzzer, a little counter.
Exactly, a little buzzer for me, just have something flash up on the screen so I explain it. So like an entity relationship diagram, really at its core, what we enabled, we internally referred to it as data workspace, but what it allows you to do is come in and use a natural language prompt, and we give you a visual representation of your tables together. So if you say, I want to build something for an inspection, we'll go, well, you'll need an inspection table, a products table, and a service technician table. Show them to you together in one visual, how they relate to each other, and then give you the ability to pull in data from Excel, pull in data from SharePoint, and work with Copilot and the visual diagram to sort of work out your data model for your app. Before, that was done in a really tabular way. You could see tables, you could work with them individually. the big change here was bringing it sort of together into one workspace where you can sort of see it visually how things connect and make sure you're setting up your data for the right way before you build your app.
So, Clay, on that, you're saying that there was historically more of a tabular way. Is that more of an industry standard? When I hear a prompt and AI changes, are we moving developers' cheese a little bit on how they work, and are they losing control over the applications that they're developing with these new features?
I would definitely say, a little bit of cheese moving, but at the same time, something familiar. Flashback a year ago, we released the first sort of iteration of using Copilot to help you build an app. We'd create a single table for you. We'd produce an app of it. The community was very clear. We heard from the community and the customers is they were like, I never build an app with just one table. That's not realistic. I need a more complex data model. I need to understand how things relate to each other. And that's something that you see in SQL Management Studio, in other tools, visually seeing how your tables and your data. So I think that is very familiar to developers, regardless of what tool they've come from. The bit we've changed a little bit is you're not just working with a visual ERD and manipulating it manually. You've also got Copilot there, like intelligently selecting data types for you, pulling in data from Excel files, generating schema and sample data for you as well. So it's a little bit of a change, but I think it's a familiar experience that we've brought a sort of strong AI assistance to.
Clay, I'm a little curious. We engage with a lot of customers in various different industries and so on. When we talk about features like this and advancements in the platform, what exactly led us to prioritize this, if you will, right? And say, oh, let's deliver this. Was it specifically because of a specific industry? Is it targeted at pro devs or maybe just citizen devs? Can you give us a little bit of how the factory works?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say this one for us was very clearly, not industry specific. And I would say not really persona specific. This was a really clear feedback we got through multiple channels after we released the initial version of sort of Copilot app creation a year ago. And we get those through multiple sources. We have, for example, there's thumbs up, thumbs down on any of the Copilot experiences. We got a lot of people giving us a thumbs down and saying, I need to work with multiple tables. One table doesn't help me. We collect data from the NPS prompt in the product. So when you get that question saying, how likely are you to recommend to a friend?
I'm going to raise my finger.
There's the buzzer NPS prompt.
Yeah. What's the NPS?
Net Promoter Score. Sorry. Thank you. Very good. You could come to other meetings with me, Ken, and just give me a verbal buzz when I use an acronym. That would be really helpful. Or at home, just to improve it in my life. So Net Promoter Score, basically you get that 0 to 10 question. How likely do you recommend? And you have the ability to provide comments. We've got a lot of feedback through there. And then more generally, we've gone out and done direct customer research, our ideas and community forum we review every day. And sort of working with multiple tables, building more complex and real applications was just kind of a resounding, consistent feedback from across those forums.
Thank you. That was a great answer. And before I get to Sean and just hand it over, I'm waiting for Clay to start saying some Knuff jokes, but I'm pretty sure we'll get to those in a bit, right?
I've already used my Knuff reference for the day, haven't I, Ken?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
All right, I want to dive into that a little bit more on user feedback. So you talked about kind of the thumbs up, thumbs down, but also is there any kind of way, and this could be more than just that specific feature, right? It could be just in generally, how are you taking feedback from the general Power Platform community and some of the events to steer your roadmap? And also, I'll tack on a part 2 question because I'm really good at multiple questions in one, is like, what has the response been to some of these features? Initially, are you seeing adoption? Are you seeing more questions or confusions, or people, again, you're moving their cheese, right? Are they jumping right in, or is there a learning curve?
I'll give you a warning. I'm not great at multi-part questions or answers. So if I don't answer the second part, please remind me as we get into it.
Sounds good.
I would say for us, like that feedback loop are sort of through those avenues I talked about before. They're pretty continual for us. I think the difference between where we look to the community forums, community events, research panels, we run round tables at the events, that gives us an opportunity for a lot more open-ended feedback. We do topics where we come in and we say, hey, what do you find most challenging today? Explain to me how you're approaching Fusion development. How much pro code are you using? We focus it on topics and we really let the room or the research sort of dictate where it goes. The in-product mechanisms are a lot more targeted, like thumbs up and thumbs down, where whether you're using a Copilot capability, a modern control, the form designer, all throughout these experiences, you kind of have feedback opportunities. And then we both look at the trend of thumbs up versus thumbs down percentages to make sure ultimately that we're healthy, that we're trending in the right direction. But then we also triage every single bit of feedback that gets sent to us. So we triage every comment, we group it into trends. And then particularly as we go into planning cycles and sort of looking at our roadmap, we spend a lot of time reading those to make sure we are addressing the larger trends. We can't address every piece of comment, every piece of feedback, but what we really look there for is where's the most pain, where are the trends in the product that we can address.
And I'll just jump in and add, as a former customer, I think because I've provided very direct feedback to Microsoft before, that now coming on the other side, I think I've said this in previous podcasts, there definitely is a bit of, we have to speak to the common denominator of so many, not just individual organizations, but industries and different needs. There are regulatory needs. And so I realize that is sometimes where you can't speak to all feedback because you're finding that common denominator across different organizational sizes or structures. So just for listeners to be aware of that context, there's a little bit of a limitation there that we have, that it's a good challenge to have, but it's a good thing to work through.
Yeah, and honestly, it's actually why I sort of got into product management. I really enjoy that aspect of I came from the consulting world where you worked with a single customer that would say, I want the product to do this. You could go and make it do that for them. And it was a really tight feedback loop. One of the really interesting challenges in product management is, we're right now, I think, supporting 33 million users on the Power Platform. You know what I mean? The very feedback. We release features that have very strong opinions in both directions. We need to sort of filter through that and try and understand what's driving that. How do we evolve the feature in the right direction with, still keeping the people that were happy, and hopefully winning a few more as we go.
And on that, so going back to the other part 2 of my question in terms of the response been to moving people's cheese, how are we seeing people working differently or adopting these tools? I know we're only a couple of weeks out from build, but I'm sure you've had some early adoption trends.
It really depends on the feature. And so I would say things like co-authoring, there's been a huge appetite for. Customers have wanted it now. And so we're seeing it get adopted really, really quickly. We have some limitations. It's only going into public preview, but customers just seem really, really passionate for it, hungry for it. They're jumping on. I would say with any of the AI-based features, we too tend to see customers take a slightly more cautious approach. They want to understand how their data is being handled. They want to understand what the feature does. That said, we announced a couple of really interesting ones at Build where now from the formula bar, for example, you can just click and ask Copilot to explain your formula for you.
Oh, that's so helpful.
It's really, really simple. And it's not just like pasting the formula into Bing and asking it. We actually use the context of the app. We explain how that formula is related to things.
It's a teaching tool.
And it's also a collaboration tool. If I pick up someone else's app and I want to understand what their formula does, I can understand it. It's helpful for me if I open up an app I haven't touched in 2 years. Let me go back through and have a look. It as a feature, huge adoption right off the bat because it's relatively low risk. It's inline. It's super helpful, and people just jump straight on board with it. As we look at something then like working with code or the data workspace, still growth there, just a little bit slower as people sort of understand how they're going to use it and how it's going to really work for them. But it really depends. We see a mix of the different features. Field suggestions is another one that went out at Build. So basically, whenever you bind data to a table or a gallery or a form now, we actually make an intelligent recommendation of which fields should be on it for you rather than just the defaults. It's skyrocketed in usage because, again, it's just super convenient. It's part of the maker's core workflow. And so features like that, we just see a really natural and healthy adoption.
So Clay, you said so many things that now I'm trying to focus in on not going too far off the farm, so to speak, let's talk a little bit about maybe performance and scalability, because those have been big things that our customers have asked and mentioned that, hey, you all should, why don't you? And, various different types of feedback. So one of the things I think that customers have been waiting for quite some time is offline apps. And that is something that, I've seen, and personally, I'll use Wendy's phrase, when I was a customer, like, why don't they have this? So can you talk a little bit about sort of, the journey to get there and how maybe customers are using offline apps, and give some examples if you could?
More broadly, as we think about performance, because offline is like one example there, I think there's a few areas we've tried to focus on. And I would say like there's one group is just like patterns that we can make better in the platform to support scenarios. Offline is a really good example. Rather than someone going and writing 15 pages of Power FX to save things to collections and retrieve them, we can make it a core part of the product and do it in a really performant way. Similarly, this is where we've invested in things like low-code plugins, named formulas, anywhere that like we can drive code reuse and sort of simplify just the number of lines of code that sit within your application. We can ultimately make it more performant. I think then the second category are things that when people are using those patterns correctly, it gives us a lot of opportunity to sort of continually evolve and improve. So once you're relying on our infrastructure to do offline rather than custom code, it means we can then keep reworking that framework and improving it so that offline is more reliable, it's faster to sync data, we can work with different data types. It's much easier for us to make continual improvement when the right patterns are in place. And then I would say kind of the third bucket, this is an area where we have a lot of opportunity to do better, is how do we bring the right learnings and insights and guidance back to the developer so that they are following the correct patterns and they are doing the right thing.
I was just about to ask about the third point, Clay. That was going to be like my follow-up point.
Yeah.
And ask, okay, now that we have things and we're introducing AI and whatnot into the platform, how are we thinking about leveraging that to perhaps promote healthy code practices, increase performance through suggesting, oh, hey, you did the formula this way, you should be maybe doing it this way because it'll return faster, and so on.
Yeah, it's absolutely sort of where we're starting to move a lot of our investment to, is around this idea of a feedback loop, in that rather than let a developer go build something that isn't performant or doesn't have the right security or performance principles, how do we sort of shift left? So if we think about a development lifecycle, how do we bring it far earlier into the process so that as a developer goes to do something, we sort of can correct or advise as they're doing it? And so I think that would be the first thing. To your point, if we start seeing someone going and writing a bunch of code on app on start, flagging that, recommending different ways for them to do that are going to be more performant. If customers start writing code about writing and saving to collections, guide them to offline. And AI has a lot of promise there for us in pattern detecting and providing recommendations. I think the flip of where we have a lot of opportunity to go into is then actually giving makers insights back about how their app is being used. So because the app runs on Power Apps as well, we obviously have a rich set of performance data, load times, how it's performing on different device types. We know where the delays in queries and performance is. And we surface this right now, like we have a couple of analytics hubs, we have performance insights that makers and admins can go and see, but they're not proactive in going back to the maker where they're working and recommending an improvement to their application. And I think that's where AI has a big opportunity for us in sort of working over those larger data sets, those larger performance data, reliability data, and using it to make recommendations back to a code change or leveraging a different feature within the product.
So, Clay, all the analytics that you're talking about collecting, are we exposing that to the admins, or does that only go to the makers so they can see the performance of their other applications?
We have it available to both at the moment. And so they're a little bit hidden. If you're in PPAC, it's under reports or analytics. Ken, you probably know better than me where it sits in the left rail. For developers or makers, it's under the app. So you sort of navigate to the application, you go into the details page or something, and then we have insights. But with both of those, they're a little bit hidden. Not a lot of people discover it by nature. And at the end of the day, it's a source of data. We give you all the performance statistics. We give you all the reliability statistics. Where we have the opportunity to go with AI is turning that into an insight or an action that the developer or the admin can act on, rather than it just be a nice chart with lots of performance insights.
That's awesome.
Careful, Clay. You've got like 2 former customers and admins on the call with you. We're trying not to get into security and compliance.
But like, I'll hold on. Let me get up. Yeah, let me get on the soapbox real quick. So Clay, you mentioned a whole bunch of new features coming out. You also mentioned adding patterns and best practices for app developers to understand. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and get your thoughts on how do these new features change the skilling requirements for solution developers and what that expectation is in the market now and going forward?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. I don't know if we know the full answer to that yet, as I think we're still very much in the middle of a shift. The last 18 months have been hugely disruptive in the tech space, and I don't think we're at the end of that journey. Like, we learn every month different ways that we can use this new technology, LLMs within the product. And so I do think that shift that we're going to see in how developers work, how developers manage solutions, and how admins work is going to continue to change. Like, I don't think we've had the change and it's static. It's going to be a continual evolution as we really start pushing the boundaries of, or even leveraging what this technology can do. Where we are going in terms of skill set is, well aligned with what we kind of sort of focus and evangelize the platform for today. Because more and more, like, we've always talked to business users and how we empower them through the spectrum of pro devs. And I think what a lot of the capabilities that we're bringing with generative AI continue to help both of those audiences. If you're coming from a business background, you're going to be able to do more on the platform by defining requirements, providing instructions, and relying less on writing code. So I think that barrier to entry is going to be lowered at one end of the spectrum. Then as we flip to the other side of the audience and we look at pro devs, we're already looking at, with YAML, for example, leveraging it with GitHub Copilot, being able to build apps faster. And so I think that high productivity aspect that a pro dev would benefit from, again, sort of accelerates. So I really think the tools that we're bringing don't necessarily cause a huge shift in the skill set or the audience. I would hope, if anything, it's going to expand that reach a little bit, lower the burden to entry. And then, our ultimate goal with all these investments, particularly with AI, is, can we just make the developer more productive?
Okay, I'm gonna open our governance.
Oh no.
I know, I'm sorry, Pandora's box here. But okay, but here's the thing, it's more of a positive thing, because, and I do want to hear, Clay, how do you address the concern if you're expanding your reach, right? More people can develop more apps. That can be scary to organizations. But it sounds like you're also doing things to help guide people to build those apps correctly, to expose problems in the apps that maybe be incorrect, right? May cause problems, continue to give those admins visibility. And so I'm curious how you're having that conversation with organizations that says, I don't want business users, I don't want anyone building an application. And if you're seeing maybe a shift in the conversation, for example, when you say, okay, if I hand my app to Sean or Ken, if I go out Zenly or whatever, they can look at my code and know what I'm doing, because now we have fun features to be able to explain it, right? So how is that conversation going for you now?
Look, it's been a really interesting shift. I started on the Power Apps team 7-8 years ago, basically whenever we released the product, and customer conversations 6 or 7 years ago were, why should I care about low code or high productivity platforms? 3 years ago, it shifted into how do I govern low code and high productivity platforms? It sort of shifted past the point of do I need it or not? It's more how do I do it in a way that I'm not going to introduce risk. And then I would say the last year, that conversation is how am I going to introduce AI into my organization and not introduce the risk? So I think definitely customers have just definitely adopted to, well, we need this, like we need this tooling. And actually more and more organizations, the group we end up talking to sometimes is like their employee experience division and drivers. They think about it as part of their employee experience, just like they will educate them on different tooling, how they will give them tools to be more productive, in their world, or it'll be a pro dev team that need to maximize their output and kind of grow. I think the way those two conversations, there's two sort of top of minds for me that always jump up. I dramatically overuse a GIF from Jurassic Park saying like, life will find a way. Because realistically, you can go turn off the low-code development tools, you can disable them all. Users are still going to find a way to solve their business problem. They'll just go do it in Excel, they'll go do it in a tool, and you won't have visibility to it. You won't know what's happening. And so I think the first sort of point for me for organizations to kind of realize is it's less about are you introducing this risk or not? It's more, are you aware of it? And are you doing something about it? Or are you just kind of letting it happen off to the side and ignoring it? I think then the second part is for us as a product team, a huge, huge focus is how do we put those guardrails on the tool so that when a developer lands in Power Apps, they get directed to the right environment. They're getting guidance on what they should build and how they should build. And then to your point, how do we use AI to do things like write a description of the app so someone else looking at it can understand what's going on? Explain the code. And then sort of this next evolution we're going to start leaning into more is providing that feedback loop so a maker can ultimately build the right things. So, I think for organizations, we're going to do as much as we can with the platform to minimize that risk, put the right guardrails on, and ultimately produce high quality solutions. I think the flip when it comes to governance is ignoring it isn't the right approach either. Users will find a way. Ultimately, as an organization, they need to understand how they want to implement it, how they want to use it. And really, that's where our governance tools, managed environments are really heavily focused.
I wish that folks could actually see me over here just biting my lip right now and not wanting to go just full governance and security on any of this. Coincidentally, when Clay said that, hey, we got serious about governance about 3 years ago, I was like, wait a minute, that's when I got hired. Hold on a second. So anyway, I digress. So
coincidence.
And to be clear, Ken, I don't think that's necessarily when we got necessarily serious about it. It's been very top of mind for us for a long time. I think it's more, that's when the customer conversations shifted from like, why do I need low code to how do I govern
100%
low code? Yes. It was more an industry and customer, focus shift that we saw.
I'll definitely second that. I don't think, my contributions and the team's contributions have been welcomed in terms of managed environments and so on. But I want to double down on what you said, Clay, about providing visibility and allowing the developers themselves to be more proactive in building their apps in a secure and compliant way, because, the teams here work very closely together and we're providing that framework for those guardrails and so on. So customers can look forward to having more confidence in building the apps and automations and everything that we provide.
I think for most of those, that's why like guardrails and awareness are really key there. Developers and makers are not set out to do anything malicious or, not produce a high quality app, or they don't want to produce an app with performance problems. So the more we can do to provide that guidance, that course correction, as early in the process as possible, it's ultimately going to lead to just a higher quality solution being built.
Awesome. Hey, Clay, so Ken just wants to make sure that we timestamp what you just said so we can put it in his review and attribute it to you. So you might see an email come that we need your signature on it.
I think that part of the recording dropped out, actually. We might have lost that.
Right. Yeah. Nice.
We'll edit it out.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks, Clay.
So we've got a wrap, Clay. We've really appreciated all your time on this, and we are planning on having you back around Ignite timeframe because we're going to revisit everything we talk about what the future holds.
Wait, Sean. Wait. What about Power Platform Conference? Clay, anything that are we looking forward to? Maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. I'm not going to spill all the beans right now. You can have me back closer to Power Platform Conference. I would say the sort of step we took at Build on like really tighter collaboration with Copilot is really that theme as we drive forward. So I would say we're really focused on how do we take that further so that the development process, particularly with Copilot and other co-authors, just naturally feels really iterative rather than sort of a one-time creation. And I would say that other big area that we've just been talking about, what's that feedback loop and insights that we can provide back to makers to sort of build higher quality apps. Those are kind of two big, broader themes we're focused on at the moment. But yes, we have some exciting things planned for Power Platform Conference as well.
I appreciate you not disclosing anything. My marketing brain radar alarm was going off. So we always like to close our episodes with any tips, tricks, recommendations that you'd want to share for any of our listeners that are, interested in any of the topics that we covered. So is there any content you would like to point them to, and we can include links in our show notes?
This sounds like I'm just going to try and get clicks for my own blog posts, but what I would say is one thing we've been trying to do in the Power Apps team, we've been doing it for about 12 months now, I think. We do a monthly roundup blog, and it's major announcements, blogs, as well as minor announcements that wouldn't necessarily get their own blog or announcement. It also includes all the updates to our training material, documentation, everything like that. We do that once a month. So one will come out within the first week of every month, sort of summarizing what's happened the month before. We've gotten really positive feedback from folks just trying to keep up with the advancements in the platform, understanding what's new, that it's a really helpful resource. The other one for me is always the community forums. We love the ideas posts as well. We review them regularly as a product team. I know we don't always action them as quickly as the community would like, but it is a great source of information for us and something that we have addressed, the top items that come through that list regularly. It's a really helpful signal.
Awesome. This is so great. Everybody, recommend you to get down to the Power Platform Community Conference. Talk to Clay. He'd love to hear from you. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, Clay, but for sure. And same for the rest of us. So thank you, Clay. Really appreciate your time, and we look forward to having you back on the show real soon.
Thanks for having me.